Inspector Mark Hargrove of the Homicide Squad was sitting at his desk that morning, sifting through paperwork, when his sub-inspector Adam Brown walked in, urgency etched on his face. "Sir, we've got a murder case on our hands," Adam said, his voice low and serious. "The cashier at Creamways Incorporation was murdered this morning in the office." Mark looked up, brow furrowing. "What do we know?" "He was stabbed twice in the stomach and left to bleed out." "It seems to have happened around 8 this morning," Adam replied, his voice heavy with the gravity of the situation. Within the hour, Mark and Adam arrived at the crime scene. The room was already cordoned off, forensic teams buzzing around like bees in a hive. After the formalities were over and the body had been taken away for a post-mortem, Mark called for the office manager, David. "Do you have any idea who did this?" Mark asked, looking directly at David, who appeared shaken. "Sir," David shook his head slowly. "I can't say who did this, but I can tell you that the cashier, Richard, had come in early today, around 7:30, to prepare a large cash transfer to our other office across town." He swallowed hard, glancing around the room as if searching for answers. "Although it's tragic, the positive aspect is that no cash was stolen from the safe." "Is moving such large amounts of cash part of your usual routine?" Mark inquired, raising an eyebrow. "This is the first time we've handled such a sizable amount," David admitted, his voice trembling slightly. Mark nodded thoughtfully and began to sift through Richard's desk. It contained the usual office supplies along with a folder of documents. He held up a sheet, his interest piqued. "What exactly is this?" David leaned in, squinting at the paper. "That's a cash transit insurance policy we took out from Safeguard Insurance for today's transfer," he explained. Mark continued to scan the room, noticing how sparsely furnished it was. "Do you have a CCTV camera?" he asked, scanning the walls. David stepped forward, pointing to a small camera cleverly hidden behind a lamp shade. "Right there," he said. "Please provide us with the footage from the last 8 hours," Mark instructed, his tone brisk and authoritative. Later that day, back in his office, Mark watched the footage intently, his mind racing with possibilities. Sub-Inspector Adam entered, looking anxious. "Sir, the camera footage is quite revealing. It shows the killer entering the room, checking the safe, and then a brief struggle with Richard. He stabbed him twice in the stomach, searched him, and then tried to break into the safe before leaving, all in just 9 minutes. The guard at the main entrance didn't suspect anything," Adam reported, shaking his head in disbelief. Mark watched the screen, noting every detail. "The killer is unidentifiable," he said slowly, contemplating the footage. "He has a mass of black curly hair, his face is obscured by a bushy beard, and he's wearing dark glasses. He clearly knew about the camera, taking care to disguise himself. Most likely, the hair and beard are fake." Adam nodded in agreement, looking worried. "How do we proceed now, sir? There's no indication of who this man could be." Mark picked up the sheet of insurance from the crime scene. "Let's start with this," he said, determination in his voice. The next day, Mark and Adam visited the office of Safeguard Insurance to speak with its manager, Harrison. "What can you tell us about this insurance policy issued by your firm?" Mark asked, placing the document on Harrison's desk. Harrison examined it closely. "Yes, we issued this policy the day before yesterday for cash transit. Richard came to meet me about it." "I see," Mark replied, his curiosity piqued. "Did you have any prior meetings with Richard?" "We've known each other for quite a while," Harrison stated, nodding slightly. Mark looked around the office, his gaze falling on an array of homeopathic glass ampoules on Harrison's desk. "What are these?" he asked, curious. Harrison smiled, a hint of pride in his voice. "I practice homeopathy as a hobby. These are various remedies I've prepared." Mark smiled politely and casually inspected the glass containers, but his mind was racing. "Would you like to grab a cup of coffee at the cafe nearby?" Mark suggested, and Harrison readily agreed. That night, at around 11:45 p.m., Mark and Adam were hiding a distance away from Harrison's house downtown. One of the windows glowed faintly, casting shadows that danced along the drawn curtains. "Let's wait," Mark said, his eyes fixed on the window, sensing something was amiss. Hours ticked by until suddenly, through the curtains, they noticed a flickering flame and faint wisps of smoke curling out into the night air. "Move immediately, or we'll lose the evidence," Mark barked, urgency filling his voice. They approached the door and knocked firmly. Harrison opened the door slightly, surprise registering on his face as he spotted the inspector. Before he could react, Mark pushed the door open, and the police rushed inside. The fire smoldered but was still burning. Mark quickly grabbed a blanket from the bed and tossed it over the flames, dousing the fire. As the smoke cleared, he found only traces of a burnt wig and beard, everything else reduced to ashes. "Inspector, what is the meaning of this? You know I can complain to your superiors," Harrison exclaimed, anger flashing in his eyes. Mark settled into a nearby chair, crossing his legs with an air of confidence. "Well, you'll be better able to explain your actions shortly," he said sternly. "We're holding you for the cold-blooded murder of Richard, the cashier at Creamways Incorporation, just 2 days ago. Are you out of your mind? You have no proof," Harrison shouted, gritting his teeth. He took a menacing step toward Mark, but Adam stepped in to restrain him. Mark smiled knowingly. "You're a clever man, Harrison, but perhaps a bit too clever for your own good. You knew about Richard's plan to move a large sum of cash today since you issued the transit insurance. He unwittingly gave you all the details." He paused, watching Harrison's expression shift from anger to confusion. "That morning, you came to the cashier's office in disguise, confident he wouldn't recognize you. But your plan went horribly wrong when he hadn't yet opened the safe, and you couldn't get the cash. Enraged, you stabbed him, and then you panicked when you realized you couldn't break into the safe. With the entrance guard seeing you, you had to leave quickly. You knew about the CCTV camera but thought your disguise would keep you safe. Proof," Mark continued, leaning forward. "When I visited your office, I noticed those homeopathic glass ampoules on your desk. One contained spirit gum, a substance commonly used to affix false beards for actors on stage. A slip-up, indeed. You thought no one would recognize it." He straightened up and glanced out the window. "Then, when we went to the cafe near your office, I observed your gait. It matched the CCTV footage. At that point, I was convinced of your guilt. I had an officer shadow you as you left work, and he saw you carrying a soft packet home. It didn't take much to guess that you planned to burn the evidence tonight." Harrison's face flushed with rage. "You're grasping at straws. This proves nothing." He violently shoved away Adam's hand and stormed into the bathroom, slamming the door behind him. Mark exchanged a glance with Adam, who was ready for anything. Moments later, a blood-curdling scream echoed from inside. "Go!" Mark shouted, kicking the door open. They rushed into the bathroom, where Harrison stood facing them, transformed. No longer the clean-shaven man they knew, he now sported a wild mass of black curly hair and an unkempt bushy beard, the unmistakable face of the killer. Desperately, he clawed at the fake hair and beard, but they were stuck, as if bound by some ghostly justice. The killer was caught in his own disguise, the truth laid bare before them. "Mark! Adam!" he shouted, his voice thick with panic, but it was too late. Justice had come for him, and there was no escaping the consequences of his actions. With the weight of the evidence surrounding him, Harrison could only stand there in defeat, a victim of his own treachery.